I'd like to introduce right now a gentleman who just won his 7th Ironman title, and a woman who started out as an age grouper here, moved on to become a pro, and the thing that impressed me the most is 4 months after having her baby, she finished 5th at Ironman Malaysia. Please give it up for Luke McKenzie and Beth Gerdes. And Wynne. Handoff, Brian. Yeah. Daddy of the month, I love it. Luke and Beth, everybody. You get the center. You get the center, yeah. Now you start out. You're starting out, Beth. Come on now.
All right.
You're the mom.
That's true.
You are the mom. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about coming back from having a baby. Because I look at the results and I'm like, I'm not quite sure when she had the baby, because there's stuff there every year. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. I'm like, I don't see any big time off for baby. How hard was it coming back from that?
Oh, man. Coming back from having a baby is really hard and really challenging, but it's also really rewarding, because for one of the first times ever, you can really see progress daily, weekly. You know, you really get that payoff from every workout, because you've been hanging out, not doing too much for 9 months, so you really get that bang for your buck. Yeah.
And well, and when I was doing a little research, I'm looking back and I said most people who have the fastest run split in Kona or at any of the Ironman races come from a running background. They ran in high school, they ran in college. I'm going, okay, I better look up Beth's running background. And I saw your first marathon was like a 3:03 at Las Vegas, and I couldn't find anything before that. So did you have a running background, or did you just all of a sudden get into it?
Yeah, no, I really didn't do much of anything until about 2007, 2008. In high school, I played field hockey and lacrosse very recreationally. In college, I did a lot of beer pong and cups very recreationally. And then after that, I did nothing until one of my friends in 2007 said, oh, you got to run the San Diego Rock and Roll Marathon with me. And I was like, well, I've never run more than 5 miles in my life.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do that. But I joined the track club in San Diego and started working out with them. I didn't make it to that start line because I got injured. That was before I found Rehab United, and haven't had any injuries since then. But after that, I said, oh, this running thing's pretty cool. So I started doing it.
And so you go from running, and then you go in 2009, you're in the triathlon. You win San Diego Triathlon Series, right, 25 to 29. 2010, first time as an age grouper, Ironman World Championships, 10:13, and a 3:10 marathon, your first time in Kona as an age grouper.
Yeah, so.
How many people here have run a 3:10 in Kona? No. First time out.
Well, I've never been a very fast runner, but as I've told you before, Bob, I try to slow down less than the rest of them.
Nice. So Luke, your background, you were involved with triathlon really early on, because I think I remember you used to work at an aid station at Foster, Ironman Foster. How old were you?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to grow up around Ironman Australia, which was in a town called Foster, about 30 minutes away from where I was born and raised. And my family would go out there every year and volunteer on the aid stations. And I idolized the people and the guys that would come to town every year and do the Ironman. And I just knew that one day I would love to take on that challenge. And I never dreamed at that stage that it would be my profession or led it to where I am now. But that's what got me into the sport and got me involved. And it was, I'm just very lucky that I had parents that raised me in that environment and really supported it.
So the last aid station, right? Paulie Kiru won that race, 5 times, 6 times. The guy was a legend. You'd run from that last aid station in with Paulie.
Yeah, that was, one of the highlights for me was getting to watch the professionals. And even in the week before, I used to swim at the Foster Swim Club, and all the pros would come to town, and they wouldn't know it, but I'd be the kid in the next lane. I'd be racing them all, and especially when they came through on the day. You know, I'd hand them their cup, and then my parents wouldn't see me for the next half an hour because I'd be just chasing them all into the finish line. So I was actually pretty useless on the aid station, but that was, that they were, just memories that really stick with me. That it's funny to see where I've come from.
Yeah. Well, and especially I look at the background, steeplechase guy, right? And steeplechase is probably one of the most brutal sports around, right? At 16, you hold the Queensland record, and you go from that to duathlon, and you had success at duathlon right away. And we're talking 16, 17 years old, so you've been in this thing forever.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually swimming from 6, 7 years old competitively up until I was about 12 years old, and I guess I got to the stage where at 12, 13, I guess, the bigger, stronger boys that go through puberty a bit earlier, I guess, sort of started to excel, and I sort of just didn't really seem to be going anywhere, and I found that it was time for me to switch my focus, and I started giving triathlon a go, and my running was always quite strong, and I think that's when I realised pretty early on after I made that switch that it was the right decision. I was able to represent Australia and at the junior elite level while I was in high school, so that sort of gave me the focus going forward to maybe one day do it professionally.
Well, you were 16 years old, where you were 7th in the world in duathlon?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty lucky that I got the leave pass from school to go and compete overseas, and I was 16 when I was shipped off to Europe all by myself. Just didn't know what I was doing, but went to Germany and had a great old time there, and to finish 7th at that World Duathlon Championships was something that really gave me the confidence to want to keep pursuing it, and knew that I was sort of at that world-class level at a junior level, so maybe one day that I could sort of progress to the senior ranks.
So Beth, when you're looking back, and you in 2011, you're 6th overall amateur at Ironman 70.3 and 15th amateur in Kona 10.04. Amateur titles, Ironman Texas, Ironman California 70.3, Timberman. Great year. From there, you turned pro in 2012. Was there any surprises going from age group to pro? Because you had a great first year as a pro.
Yeah, in 2011, I had a really strong season as an amateur, and I felt like by the end of the year, the other girls in the age group were kind of getting sick of me. Like,
she's winning again.
Can you move on, right? But I still saw that there was a big, sometimes 15, sometimes 20, sometimes 30-minute gap from where I was to the top of the sport.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to tell when the best time is to take that leap. But I felt like I had really, I wasn't like, I need another age group medal or something like that.
Sure.
So I thought, I'm going to try this. But it was a huge jump, especially for me in the swim. I didn't grow up as a swimmer. All my amazing swimming ability has come since I was 28. So that was a really challenging part, because I'd say that actually swimming in the age group fields is a bit easier because you can just follow the stream of salmon, salmon swim upstream, right? I want to go downstream. But, you can follow a big group of people, whereas in the pro race, oftentimes if you're not the strongest swimmer, you're left on your own. Yeah. So I really had to find a lot more about what motivated me during those races, and just keep the focus on, what could I do, and start to learn how to really race alone. Because as a female pro, if you're not starting out in the front of the race in the swim, you're going to spend a lot of that day alone. So you got to have a lot of things to think about.
Well, and that first year as a pro, you did 7 half Ironmans, 3 full Ironmans. And we're talking, 8th Ironman Cozumel, 6th Ironman France, and 2nd Ironman Wisconsin, which I'm guessing, if you look back on, probably is the best race. Do you think?
You know what? I don't think that that's my best race, but at the time, that was a big win for me to come second at Ironman Wisconsin, and that was the first time I broke 3 hours in the marathon. Yeah. And that's not an easy marathon course. So for me, that was something that said, hey, you know what? I might be able to really make that jump from what I considered myself at the time more of like a B-level pro to really competing with the top girls.
Where did you meet this guy?
You know, I've known Luke as a friend for a long time through racing. And then a few years ago, he decided to move to San Diego for a few months leading up to Kona. This was 2013.
Yeah.
That year he did really great.
I see how that works together, yeah.
And right around that time, he said, he got in touch with me and he said, hey, you know, I know you live in North County, San Diego. Do you know anyone who happens to have a room or something that I could rent? And I thought, well, I know this guy, Mac Brown, who used to be a pro.
Yep.
Mac conveniently lives just a block from where I was living, and I said, I think he has a room to rent. So I found Luke a room right across the street from me. And of course, I was his go-to person for, you know, where should I ride, where should I swim, which restaurants should I go to? So I said, oh, well, I'll show you around.
I'll show you around. You used to live here. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then he was
knew
playing
where to
dumb.
go.
He was
Yeah.
playing dumb.
He was
But
definitely
yeah, so
playing
that's when
dumb.
we started hanging out, was in 2013, around this time of year.
So, Luke, let's talk about those early years in San Diego. What I love is when you look back to nowadays, if you're an Australian athlete, you can stay in Australia. There's more races than ever before. You can go to Asia. You can go to the United Arab Emirates from there. But back in the day, if you wanted to make a living as a pro, you went to Europe or you came to the States, because this is where we had Wildflower and St. Croix and all the legendary races that guys like Luke read about growing up in Triathlete magazine. So when you come to the States and you come to San Diego, and I think McKeely and Pete Colson were really instrumental in getting you a place here, but you and Craig Alexander, living in Carlsbad, sleeping on air mattresses right by the train tracks in Carlsbad?
Yeah. And McKeely will remember training with me in the Gold Coast in Australia that one year, and you know, it was her and Pete at the time that said, you know, you got to come over here and race on the US non-drafting circuit, and you know, it was a big leap of faith, and you know, it was, you know, looking back on it, you know, I was really fortunate that I was able to, you know, have that assistance from McKeely at the time, because not only did she find Craig and I a place to live, but I was also riding one of her spare TT bikes. I didn't even have a TT bike to ride. So, yeah, and, you know, it's funny to think back in the day, you know, Crowy was sleeping in the room next door on a blow-up mattress, and we were basically living on the train tracks up there in Carlsbad. It was, you know, it was a very humble existence those first few years over here, and we were racing from race to race. You know, I came over here with not a cent to my name basically, and had to go to every race. You know, SDIT, Carlsbad. Yep. You know, every now and again we'd have enough money maybe to fly to Chicago for a race, or but you know, there was some times where I'd ring my dad and you know, he'd spot me some money and say, and you know, he'd say, you know, come on, you're doing well. You just gotta keep at it. And yeah, it's those first few years were very humbling.
Were there times where you wondered if it was the right decision, where you thought maybe I should go get a real job? Yeah,
I mean, I would go back to Australia and I would deliver pizzas and do a paper run and do all those things when I'd go back, just to save up some money to keep coming back over. And you know, back in those days, we didn't really have many races in Australia, and that you could make a good living out of the sport. And honestly, as I was growing up, we were probably at the height of our dominance in the male. You know, in the professional ranks, we just had so many good athletes. It was just so cutthroat. So, you know, it was a real sort of last man standing type thing back in those days.
What was the race that you look back at and go, that was my breakthrough? That was one where I knew I can make it. Was that Western Australia?
Yeah, I was over here in 2004 and had done a few half Ironmans, and I guess at the age of 24, I had the strength at that stage, and you know, I'd always knew that I wanted to do Ironman. It was a matter of just knowing when the right time to do it was. And they announced this race in Western Australia. It was the first Ironman since Foster you know, we got our second Ironman that year. So it was at the end of the season. I'd been over here. I'd had a fairly successful year, but you know, it was a really good focus for me in December of 2004 to to go and do this Ironman in Western Australia. And, you know, I led it for a lot of the day, and I saw that, you know, I had potential at the Ironman. I finished third, and I just knew from that point that, yeah, now my focus had shifted to the long stuff.
And you passed out in the chute coming through the finish?
Funny about that, I went out in the first 10 kilometres of the run there, and Jason Shortis, who's quite an icon in Australia,
big guy.
He was sitting about a minute back, and you could just see him just shaking his head. He's like, this kid doesn't know what he's doing, and he eventually passed me. But the funny thing about that was then went on to have, for probably the next 15 miles, a huge ding-dong battle with Pete Jacobs,
yes,
who was also doing one of his first Ironmans at the time. And by the third or fourth lap of that race, the course had got quite congested, and I was sitting in second place, and I thought, I've got Pete. You know, I got to the last turnaround, and with about 2 or 3 kilometres to go, all of a sudden Pete just came bombing past me, and I don't know where he'd been, but I think I just missed him in one of the aid stations or something, and from that point, yeah, I did a lot of walking, and I barely made it across the line, but I finished my first Ironman, and it was a very tough introduction to the long distance racing, but one that definitely was the tipping point to really giving it a go.
And doing that in your home country, that must have been special.
Yeah, I mean, my family was there. My dad had obviously been there since we were going out to Foster, so he was excited for me to give this Ironman a go, and you know, he was very supportive with my decision to go and do Ironman, and you know, from a very young age, Dad had been a mentor to me. Being a football coach back in Australia, he has a very different view on coaching, I guess, and he has a lot of he looks at the mental side of things a lot, and I think that was you know, something, especially back then as well, that he was really valuable in me making the move to Ironman.
So, Beth, let's talk a little bit about after you have the baby, and 4 months later you're doing an Ironman, and you've done how many Ironmans since then, since that Malaysia race?
I've done Ironman Malaysia in last September.
Right.
Ironman Western Australia in December.
Yeah.
And then Ironman Melbourne in March. And then I just attempted to do Ironman Cairns 2 weeks ago with Luke, but I had my first ever Ironman DNF because I wasn't able to fix my second flat.
Oh, what happened with did you have the wrong stuff on your bike?
Let's not talk about my mechanic.
We're talking the wrong
But honestly,
belt.
the lesson you learn here is that you should be responsible for your own equipment, and you shouldn't trust anybody else to have you prepared.
I think
You
Luke
can only
agrees with
prepare
that
yourself.
100%. You should always not have the wrong valve with the wrong tire for the wrong wheel. Is that the way it should probably work? Yeah.
Maybe, but he made up for it because he won the race, so
Yes.
clean slate, we're good.
Yeah, and being at the finish with Wynne,
Oh, it was awesome.
their little girl Wynne, just turned a year, right?
Yep, Wynne just turned a year.
There's Wynne, yeah.
Last week. She was born at the very end of May last year, so.
So you were able to get Wynne and get to the finish line to cheer Daddy in.
Exactly. So it made it a big deal because the last time when he won was when we first started dating, but I was also racing there. I came fifth that day, but
Yes.
I was asking people on the course, who won? Who won? And people were probably wondering why I was so curious, so I didn't get to see it.
So when you with the whole thing with Ironman qualifying,
Yeah.
we got, for people who don't know, there's a system right now where 50 pro men qualify for Kona, and only 35 pro women qualify for Kona. There's a lot of controversy about that because the reality in this day and age, there should be equality, and there should be 50 men and 50 women, period, end of story. But there isn't, and I had Andrew Messick on the radio show, and he told me that the men actually are at a disadvantage because 23% of the women pros will qualify to go to Kona, and only 16% of the men, and a number of other things like that don't mean anything. But for someone like yourself, it really makes no sense, right? The reality is that in this day and age, and Luke agrees, and the male pros agree, that it should be, the women pros work just as hard as the male pros. It's the same course, it's the same challenge. For yourself, to get to Kona for this year, you've basically done 3 Ironman races since September.
Yeah.
And you would need to do a 4th now to get to Kona to potentially do a 5th.
Right. I think, well, yeah, it does sound crazy, but at the same time, I think the difficult part to swallow is that, and that I think that maybe Mr. Messick doesn't fully understand, is that the depth in the women's field now has grown so much.
Absolutely.
And it's not, I haven't done, 3 mediocre races. I did Ironman Malaysia, which actually was, I would say, a mediocre result for myself. But then in the 2 following races, I went 9:04 in Ironman Western Australia.
And broke the run course record?
And broke the run course
Yeah.
record. But I only came 4th.
2:58, right?
But I came 4th,
Yes.
which just shows you the depth in the women's field. 5 to 10 years ago, a 9:04 would have won any race in the world.
Yeah.
So, and I beat girls that day like Yvonne van Vlerken, who's podiumed at Kona, that kind of thing. So I feel like I'm finally at the level where I can compete with these women. At Ironman Melbourne in March, I had the fastest run again. I only came 5th, but it was the Ironman
Asia Pacific
Championships.
Yep.
On that day, she may not have been in her best form, but I beat Mirinda Carfrae and a lot of other really strong women. And I feel like I've shown that I have the talent to compete in Kona, but unfortunately, with the way that the system is designed, the women need about, I think right now it's about 1,200 more Kona points than men do. So as of now, Luke and I are sitting in similar places in the Kona points ranking.
Mm-hmm.
I have 25 more points than Luke does.
You dominate. You own him.
Even after his win, just because I've raced a lot, because
Yes.
this is a big goal and a big dream of mine. But he has a safe spot to Kona, yet I'm definitely not qualified yet, and I need to do another Ironman.
So then you can't get by with another 70.3. You've got to do a full.
Yes. Well, it depends on who you are, and that's another thing. Like, I'm definitely an Ironman athlete.
Right, you do better at the longer distance,
Yeah,
yes.
that's my strength, and so I feel like the Ironmans should be what qualifies you for Kona, and they should count the most. Whereas right now, the 70.3s are weighted pretty strongly, so that's one of my struggles too, but I can't complain about that. That's just the way it goes. I need to get better at 70.3s then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Luke, what are your thoughts?
Don't start me. I mean, I've been watching, Beth progress in her professional career over the last few years, and obviously she took a year out to have our child, and I've watched her come back to professional racing and to do an Ironman within 3 months of giving birth is, and not to mention she did Ironman Malaysia, which is basically on the equator. It's one of the hardest races you can do, and to place 5th, I thought, wow, that's phenomenal. And then she goes on to compete against some of the best girls in the world at Ironman Western Australia, Ironman Melbourne. Mm-hmm. She's in amongst all girls that have podiumed at Kona, that are household names in our sport. Yep. And I'm a bit disillusioned as to how, if she's performing at that level, it's got to indicate that there's more depth in the women than what Andrew Messick thinks. And I was really annoyed at the fact that Beth even had to line up at Ironman Cairns last weekend. I mean, we were ambassadors for the event, and it was an event that we really enjoyed to do. And don't get me wrong, but to have to race 4 Ironmans in 12 months after giving birth to a child and performing so well, yet she's not deemed good enough, it's ridiculous.
It's interesting because back in the day, the best people in the world were invited to do Kona. The whole idea was you wanted the best people on all 12 cylinders on the starting line in Kona. And my feeling is that we sort of compromise Kona because how many people are actually healthy trying to do 3, 4, and possibly, if you've got 4 Ironman within 11 months in your legs to try to race and be successful, have a great race in Kona, I just don't know if that's feasible.
Yeah, you nailed it right there. And I've had conversations with Andrew Messick, and he said, well, it's on the table for next year. And I'm like, it might be too late next year. Someone
People's
like
careers.
Beth, she's like, well, I've just done 4. I've beaten myself around the bush. We're about to fly to a 5th. Can you go through that all again another year and possibly sacrifice having your second child? I know it's our profession, but at the same time, I feel, he's probably just not looking at it at the right way. I mean, to say that because there's more men racing pro that they should get more slots, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, you just have to look at the points rankings to see that there's so many guys over in Europe and wherever that have no desire to go to Kona. They do one race a year, and so they're in that points rankings. That that is not even an argument in my eyes.
So, speaking of Ironman, you have been there. No, this is you, Luke. You've been there a number of times, and 2013 was a legendary year. And you started that off with a win at Cairns, right? You had a win there, and then I think you were 50th at 70.3 Worlds. But did you feel that after you won in Cairns, didn't Macca say to you, mate, you can win Kona?
Yeah, it definitely gave me the confidence going into Kona. That win in Cairns was, something. It was a race that I really targeted.
Yeah.
I hadn't won an Ironman event for 3 years at that stage, and I was just really hungry to perform at a level that I thought, I knew I was capable of. I needed to get it out of myself, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself and a lot of focus into that race 2 years ago. And having been, having it in my home state where I lived in Australia, I think, was something that I really wanted to have on my resume to win in front of family, friends at home. And so I went there and I had a really good race and I won. And Macca was third in that race that day. And we were standing around after the race. I think we were in drug testing or something. And he said, mate, if you take that to Kona and do what you did today, you can win it. And I was just like, wow, this guy just won Kona a year or two ago.
He knows.
He knows how to win it.
He knows how to win it.
And so, yeah, and I just prepared like I did for Cairns, for Kona, and just really had that faith and belief. And obviously going out there and training with Crowe, who's another guy that, not only I've trained with for Kona since he's been doing it, but obviously dating back to the times that we lived here, it was, he was saying the same things. We were doing sessions, 2 weeks out, and I'd gone from being, the guy that was getting my butt kicked by Crowe in those sessions
To pushing him.
I was pushing him, and he was finishing those sessions going, mate, I've never seen you in this form. You can win it. And so I just think, having mentors like those guys, was something that, with their faith in me,
Yes.
gave me the faith in myself.
And then you basically lead that race from off the bike. You're leading, first 16 miles of the marathon. You're sort of owning it. How cool was that to be leading? Because as a kid growing up, that's the dream, right? To
Absolutely.
be leading the Ironman.
Yeah, I first took the lead at probably Kauai High, about 75, 80 miles into the event. And anyone that's been to Hawaii or watched it, it's a bit of a spectacle when you get to the front of the race. You have the helicopters above you, you have all the TV cameras buzzing around you, and it's just this real funny feeling. You're in this absolute, desolate. It's such a tough place, Hawaii, and all of a sudden all that stuff just drops away, and you just feel amazing. And I was just able to keep pushing and pushing just because I had this extra energy from, I don't know what it was. It was just the euphoria of leading the race, I guess.
You're leading the Ironman. You got the helicopter following you.
It's a lifelong dream, to be in that position. And it was the same once you got on the run. It was just amazing. I felt the energy of, there were so many people lining the road. You literally had goosebumps for miles and miles, especially through the Alihi Drive section, just because literally everyone was, getting goosebumps now. Just stepping out in front of you and yelling in your face, and it was, it was really cool. And then, then I got to the energy lab.
I don't think you're the first guy to have that. But still, going in there, your best finish had been 9th up until then, so here you are leading, and, you get past, but still, coming in second, you still had to feel like that's a huge, huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think the big thing that day for me was not only leading the race, but also fighting for that second place. And in my mind, I was still fighting for the win. I think I did go through a low point in the energy lab, but once I got out of there, I really did come good again, and I held this minute deficit to Freddie for a long time coming back towards town, and I just kept pushing, thinking, well, you never know what can happen in this race, and we've seen so many people get to just a few miles to go and totally crumble. So, in my eyes, I was still pushing to win it, because what I kept telling myself is, what if you're never in this position to win this race again? It's the race that you've grown up wanting to win and dreaming about for so long. I mean, you might never get this chance again. So, I mean,
Wynne's excited. Wynne's excited about it.
On the day it didn't happen, Freddie was able to beat me by about 3 minutes. But, it was a very pleasing result, having, ridden the highs and lows throughout the years.
And Beth, you were there. You were sort of shepherding the family around, right? Yeah, Luke's, everybody out there. What was that like, watching him have the race of his life?
Oh my gosh, it is seriously more nerve-wracking watching that race than it is doing it or being in that position. We were constantly leapfrogging Luke, and just it was incredible. And that was also the week right prior to Kona, about 3 or 4 days before we found out that we were going to have a baby. So he does well under pressure, because we just did Ironman Cairns where he won, and we had gotten engaged like 3 or 4 days before. So we just have to plan our wedding right before a big race, and he should be good to go.
I love that. I love that. And when did you know that he was going to get second place? And were you out there watching?
They changed the run course a bit that year, and they really blocked off this long section, about 10 miles, through the energy lab. So we saw the guys go into the energy lab, and Luke went in the lead. And then we're just just gnawing on our arms, just crazy, trying to figure out who's going to come out. And we heard some reports that maybe Freddie had passed him. We didn't know. And then Freddie came out of the energy lab before him. But I mean, for him to still be in second and be running strong, we were just so excited, because that was huge. We all thought, okay, Luke can get top 5 this year. But I don't know if we even thought that he would come second. So it was really amazing.
When you get second in a race like that, how did that change things for you in terms of the perceptions? You talk about Crowe had been second, and then he won the next year. Macca was second, he won the next year. Pete Jacobs was second, he won the next year. Changes pressure, right? People now are looking at you as a guy who can win. Yep. At the same time, it's also opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many guys that have progressed from that second to the win, and I think it's about really everyone lines up in Kona at that top professional level with so much ability, but at that level, I think it really comes down to a mental aspect of it all. And especially after having a day like that, I think it sort of unlocks that deep mental state that you have to go to, that you've really got to hurt yourself to achieve that win there. And I think that's something that I definitely took away coming second. It really opens up your mind to what you can actually achieve.
So you come back the following year, obviously more media stuff because you're second place, and you end up 15th. But what impresses me about that, I think 20 guys dropped out that day. And a lot of times when you're not having your day, it's easy to start thinking, okay, there's Florida, there's Arizona, I can go get some points there. Sometimes it's hard to hang in there knowing that you're not going to be top 10. But you were, I think, 11th or so going to Energy Lab, so you're probably still thinking, okay, I can be top 10 here.
Yeah, I had a terrible swim, and it was a bit of a story of last year, just having bad swims that put me behind. And
that was psychological, you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I just, I'd been swimming, obviously, for 20 more years at that stage. And, I don't know if people go through it with work or with other areas of their life, but maybe you just start to overthink things, and you're trying too hard, or something's just not clicking there. And that was definitely the case with my swimming last year.
It's like a slump.
Yeah.
It's like in other sports, you get into a slump. All of a sudden, you start and you're a little panicky.
Yeah, I was definitely.
You guys have had that before, right? Beginning to swim, a little panicky, the wetsuit feels tight.
Yeah.
But you don't think that the pros have that. Yeah, you guys are all nodding.
Trust me, we do. And, it was tough last year because, I felt like I was a bit of a marked man on the bike too. I came came out of the water so far back that every time I tried to pass people or whatever was the dynamic that was going on the bike, I just really felt very isolated and by myself out there. Obviously, people, knew that, that I was going to push them towards the front of the race. I was riding through the field, and it was a bit to my own detriment. I sort of hit a bit of a flat spot where usually I sort of excel up RV, but this last year I really suffered. But at the same time, I really, I'm proud of myself for not letting that overcome my race and pushing through it. And I think, it goes to show that even if your day is going south and not the race that you planned, you can still salvage something from it. And I think, I still came off the bike a long way down on the lead, which is, not, after coming off the bike in the lead the year prior, it's a hard pill to swallow. And but I fought for it in the marathon, and I almost got up into the top 10 by the time I got to the energy lab, which obviously the year prior I'd sort of crumbled at that point. So, I ended up 15th on the line. Obviously having Craig Alexander and those guys running you down in the last few miles isn't exactly what you would want to see, but at the same time, I think, to salvage 15th on a day that wasn't, all you expected, I think that's not bad.
No, and also you've been there 8 times, 8 finishes.
Yeah, this year
4 top 15s.
This year will actually be 10 years, 10 straight years that I've qualified for Kona, which is, something that I'm pretty proud of, because I think especially the first year I was there, I was actually was the year that McKenzie won. And
yes, 06.
And just going back to what you said about how many people have run a 3:10 marathon in their first Hawaii. I ran 3:29 and McKenzie Jones passed me with about 2 miles to go. I came 59th.
Love that. So let's talk a little bit about the big win. A couple weeks ago, you go to Australia, the race you've won before, and had a big lead off. Things are different now. Big lead off the bike. I think you're like 4:30 on the bike on a tough bike course. 8:21. You had 8:21 on Cam Brown and like 18 minutes on Dylan McNeese at the end of the day. So this is more of a. Did you feel like it was more of a victory lap, or were you running a little scared, not knowing what's going to happen?
I tell you what, if you're a student of the sport, you would know that Cam Brown is one of the most consistent and best runners in the sport of Ironman racing, and it was a very daunting prospect getting off the bike. I think I was about 13 minutes in front of him off the bike.
That's right. He took 5 minutes out. Yeah.
Having led that race the year 2 years prior by 18 minutes, and Tim Burkle ran a 2:44 to get within about 6 minutes of me, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to let up. And to have Cam sitting back there was, honestly, when I saw him for the first time, I didn't know whether I was going to be able to hold him off. But I had a strong marathon, and I was able to take the win. But it definitely was a lot harder than it indicated.
Now, were you planning to propose before you went over?
It was the right timing. It was the place where we'd really, we fell in love there, I think. I mean, we really started dating at that time 2 years prior, and not only that, we had my family there, but we also had Beth's family over from the States for their first trip to Australia. So it was the right setting and in a beautiful location. We were able to go out to an island on the Great Barrier Reef, which was stunning, and to have Wynne there as well. She helped me propose. And
how'd you do? What'd you do?
Well, it didn't all work out to plan. It was a little windy, and I wanted to take Beth on a walk down to the other end of the beach with Wynne. And we got about halfway down and sort of rounded a corner of the island, and the wind really sort of came up in our face. And Beth's like, let's turn around, let's go back. No, I'm like, no, let's go down the end of the beach. And yeah, I was sort of fumbling. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have to improvise, because I don't want to, I didn't want to do it back in front of the family. It was already sort of planned in my head. And
did they all know? The family all know?
Well, funny you should say that. I'd been trying to nail down Beth's father the whole few days before we went out there to do it, and he just didn't he just didn't give me the window to do it. So I actually did it on the boat ride out to the island on the back of the boat. And he gave me his blessing, but lucky. Otherwise,
a little too late.
Mightn't I come back from the island? But yeah, and so I had a little vision that, Wynne has sort of started to be very interactive and loves picking stuff up and whatever. And I had a little vision that I'd place the ring box down on the ground, and Wynne would pick it up and hold it up for Mum. But she sort of had another idea when I put her on the ground. She took off. The wind was going everywhere, and Beth sort of already starting to walk back, and I'm like, So, yeah, I wouldn't say it was the best and not most ideal proposal. I think it was good improvisation, but she said yes, and we were able to walk back down the end of the beach and be with our family, which was really cool.
How about a round of applause for Luke and Beth?